The beauty of AI is the democratization of information. The beast of AI is the information that's being fed might not be the information we want democratized. And I think most people would still prefer clinical advice and eventually a human face when they have a problem. In absence of that, they're going with what's been highly funded and highly optimized to be put in front of them.
Hello and welcome to the MM+M Agency 100 podcast brought to you by Huge. I'm Bella Czajkowski. I'm a reporter here at MM+M. And for today's conversation, we're talking about one of healthcare's biggest digital challenges, which is why patient expectations continue to rise while many healthcare experiences struggle to keep up. From AI-powered patient journey mapping to the lessons health systems can borrow from retail, hospitality, and other consumer industries, we'll explore what it takes to design digital experiences that actually work for patients. I'm pleased to be joined today by Lauren DeGeorge, who is the Chief Client Officer at Huge. Lauren, how are you today?
I'm so well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Happy to be here. We will jump right in. So I understand you came to healthcare from a non-healthcare background, which was a bit eclectic. Luxury goods, consumer packaged goods, digital experiences at Publicis and Edelman. So when you looked at healthcare's digital landscape for the first time with fresh eyes, what did you see that the industry itself was maybe not noticing?
I mean, first of all, I had to be accepted because I feel like when you're an outsider in the healthcare space, it's kind of like, what can you do for me? Have you heard of HIPAA? And I'm like, yes, I've heard of it. I'm an individual living in the United States of America. I think I looked at it really as any patient would. And I had a lot of questions about the dysfunction that I experienced as an individual person living in this world. I think I also had a lot of questions about, like, why was there so much kind of homogenous content out there? And also was very curious about how the process to creation differed from other industries. I think one of the things that I've noticed, having dipped a toe in this industry, and as you mentioned, coming from hospitality, luxury, a lot of retail, a good bit of B2B, it feels like a lot of things in healthcare start with what you can't do and where you have to start from as a baseline of limitation rather than designing for what's possible. And I think being a couple of years into that, I totally appreciate it because a blue sky exercise for a payer or for a health system is probably not the most valuable use of time. But I do think looking at healthcare and not looking at your direct competitors in healthcare, but looking at aspirational, experience-led brands in other industries that are delivering delight, that are kind of managing expectations, that are delivering customer satisfaction. I think there's a lot of value in that, despite the regulations and restrictions being quite different.
Your point about HIPAA is really funny. Like, yeah, it's such a nuanced thing, but we're all familiar with it at some point for sure.
Yeah. And now it's like, have you heard of HIPAA? You know?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So welcome to the inner circle where we discuss HIPAA all day.
There's two A's. Okay.
Yeah. Get it down. Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense. I think that's a good starting point for our conversation. And I feel like increasingly we're seeing that in health systems themselves, CMOs or CDOs are, often coming from different backgrounds as well, non-healthcare backgrounds as well. What do you think they're asking for that their current partners aren't delivering?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a trend that exists in our own client set. Like if you look at a variety of primarily CMOs, I would say chief communications officers in some places and chief digital officers where they still exist, like they're coming from large enterprise backgrounds that have B2B and B2C components, but they're increasingly, they're not coming from healthcare. I think what they're asking for from us is a couple of things. Like they're asking for the rigor and the productivity of kind of like enterprise grade systems. And they're also asking us to work at their pace rather than the pace of healthcare. Which I think is actually a really appropriate challenge. they're also asking us, where does AI fit in this landscape, right? I mean, it took us, 6 minutes for AI to come up, perhaps being generous, but like that is something that they are asking us at Huge. They want the rigor of the systems they know we can build. They want the design and experience expertise. They want the warmth and the consumer friendliness of the tone and the experiences we design. But they also want accelerated delivery. They want speed to value. They want what everyone else around them gets who doesn't work in healthcare. And I think a lot of our jobs have changed in the last, I've been at Huge 10 months. I think even in the last 6 months, the baseline of the questions have changed. It's not, what can my website do better than this other health system? It's, how can I deliver an experience that is authoritative, accessible, credible, compliant in a way that Peloton is doing, right? Or in a way that Amazon is doing. And I think those are kind of the juicy questions that go beyond the CMO seat. They require partnership from the CIO or the CTO office. And frankly, at this point, they require CEO buy-in, because actually no one owns AI in any kind of Fortune 500 at this point, officially, right? It's kind of like what we saw in digital 15, 20 years ago.
It's hearing you talk about that healthcare versus non-healthcare, expectation. It almost sounds like a little kid in the backseat of the car going, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there?" Which maybe a fitting metaphor.
About that though, Bella, is like, they are the people controlling the industry that affects everyone. They should be in the driver's seat in terms of mass applicability. You know what I mean? Like, healthcare is the only industry that is a universal human need and human right, right? Like, you're designing for someone who owns a smartphone. You're designing for someone who's never owned a smartphone. You're designing for someone who's posting on LinkedIn about AI, and also someone who thinks AI is just the latest scam. Like, they have every reason to lead and every reason to design for universality, but it's hard. Yeah, absolutely. There's such a range. I'd like to talk a little bit about intelligent twins for healthcare, which I understand is a tool or a capability that Huge built that sort of simulates real patient behavior across like digital touch points before you build or redesign anything. So early in the process there. What has that revealed about the gap between what health systems think patients are doing versus what they're actually doing? Yeah, it's an interesting offering that we've kind of brought to a couple of different healthcare clients. So broadly, intelligent twins it's kind of a simulation tool. So we can simulate a patient journey using synthetic data. And we've got a tool that we call Live that's built on top of Google Cloud. It's fully HIPAA compliant. And we can sort of take these 2 billion real world data points and analyze a hypothesis. We can test a prototype. So it's kind of interesting because it takes you from idea to evidence-backed almost thesis in a way, much faster than kind of most prototypes can, because it's based on real world data. So rather than like assessing optimizations based on data points in time or based on like, frankly, your boss's point of view on something, we're actually using evidence-based real world testing to kind of help clients get an understanding of where they should spend their time, their capital, and frankly, their cycles of their own team and their agency's money. We tested Intelligent Twin for a client. It was really fascinating. We had clients who were telling us that their find a doctor component was broken and that they came to us, we hadn't designed it, and they asked us to optimize the funnel. We used Intelligent Twin, and we used, I believe, over 100,000 simulated synthetic patients. And we found that actually the problem was not the funnel. And frankly, we had every reason to want to tell them it was, because I think another partner had done the work. But we found that actually people were dropping off before they even got to the booking capability. And so it was effectively more a journey design and probably content strategy issue than it was a conversion issue.
So they're looking in the wrong place, it sounds like, a little bit. So on the topic of AI, on the topic of health information, obviously we've all heard like crazy stories about people asking AI for questions about everything under the sun. But when it comes to health information, it's obviously really important that the information they get is credible. And, you know, oftentimes it's sourcing from things like, you know, the New England Journal of Medicine, but then the next search it might cite Reddit and like someone's random dad saying something about something. What is the behavior sort of tell us about what health systems are failing to provide and what's the right design response in your opinion?
Yeah, I think, I mean, first of all, every time I go to Reddit, it tells me I'm having a heart attack and I'm like, I just don't think I am, you know? So, I think that's kind of one part of the thesis, if I'm being honest. So I think the way that we've been approaching a lot of our clients these days is like, we think three big things are happening in the industry. I think one is we know that providers are consolidating, right? This is an industry, unfortunately, that lives and dies on M&A. So healthcare providers are consolidating, but care is actually fragmenting, right? You might go to urgent care. You might not have a primary care doctor. Many Americans don't. You might have records at an emergency room. You might have records at your pediatrician and you've aged out. Like there's broad patient confusion in the system. We also think, you know, people both having come of age and coming of age are digital first at this point in their behaviors. So that provides greater access. And in some ways, you could argue broader equity in the system, but it also exposes new risks, right? If you think of somebody using like a pregnancy tracker, if you think of digital therapeutics and the regulation that's going to eventually be required there, that's another angle. And then the last, of course, is AI, right? People are turning to AI for the answers that they are having an impossible time finding elsewhere, or are too scared to ask elsewhere because there's a stigma, or it's, you know, obviously this is an industry and a behavior fraught with anxiety. I think what it tells us is that in a world that really lacks centralization, people are turning to what's available for them. So navigating a health system's website, calling a number, waiting on hold, God forbid we broach in the payer territory, like people are looking for immediacy and they're going where they can get it. The problem there is that, as you said, AI doesn't know the difference between the Mayo Clinic and Reddit. I mean, they probably do at this point, if we're being honest. They all also want to go public. But ultimately, depending on how that content is structured and how that content is authored, you're not getting content from a benevolent provider. You're getting content that's been architected for the search that you're doing. And so in this scenario, like what I would tell the health systems is like, if you're not the easiest, fastest, most searchable, most visible answer, not only are you losing out as a business, you're also failing in your duty of care to patients. And I think that's hard because content strategy and content creation is laborious and requires a lot of bureaucracy to ever see the light of day. But the truth is, if we don't adjust, you know, the robots will continue to thrive, is what I'm saying. And we can maneuver them to be more useful and authoritative and regulated, but that doesn't solve a problem that a health system still has.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like what you're saying is, you know, with the fragmentation, or the combining forces, like providers consolidating, but also care fragmenting, like that tech, that digital experience can either be a helping hand or it can be sort of serve to make the divides or the gaps feel bigger. And I'd imagine also like from a patient experience perspective, be really frustrating. You know, tools that health systems that are really digital forward or tech enabled, but sort of miss the mark and the execution is, I mean, as a patient myself, I feel like that would be worse than there being no promise of that type of thing. Yeah.
In a world where we still have doctors, I want a doctor's answer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, the beauty of AI is the democratization of information. The beast of AI is the information that's being fed might not be the information we want democratized. And I think most people would still prefer clinical advice and eventually a human face when they have a problem. In absence of that, they're going with what's been highly funded and highly optimized to be put in front of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, if I could just ask you sort of generally and go whichever way you want with this, but when you think about what healthcare clients need most from a design and technology partner in the year of 2026, which of course will change by 2027 and 2028. But what's sort of like the conversation that you're most often having that you think as an industry, like maybe isn't being centered enough?
Yeah, where to start? I think there's a variety of things. One is people have backed themselves into a corner, and we as an industry have enabled this into complex infrastructure with significant layers of user rights. And it's made, just to the question we were talking about before, it's made getting their information out much harder and much slower. So I think a lot of people today are kind of rethinking their stack. They're also rethinking their priority of messaging, right? Like people are defaulting to places where it's easier to get the messaging out, sometimes at the expense of maintaining their owned channels. We're having that conversation a lot. We're also having conversations with some clients about trust, right? Yeah. Like, I think people still sort of trust websites, particularly if it's a hospital website, if it's a healthcare company website. I think even the most cynical of patients and consumers are like, I know my insurance provider doesn't want to get sued, so they're not going to put something on the website that's not real. Yeah. But I think as the ecosystem gets even noisier than it ever was, and as niche players continue to pop up who are optimizing for SEO, AEO, and GEO, I think we're having a lot of conversations about trust, misuse of data, content authority, whose right and whose permission exists in order to say certain things. I think the other thing that we're talking about with clients is in an age where anyone can make anything, sometimes in a day, where do you spend your money and your time, right? Like, do you, broad healthcare system in Pennsylvania, need to do this? Can you partner to do it? And if yes, where should you spend your time and your resources elsewhere? The last thing I would say, there's so much in this because the conversations have changed so dramatically. But the last thing I would say is like, people are also starting to talk about the structure of their organization in a way that I haven't seen in probably like 15 or 20 years. Like who owns the customer today? One person in your organization might own the record and the data. One person might own the first party data they provided you. One person might own all the channels that reach them. But like, who's the final decision maker? How does AI impact all of this? Like, people are really kind of having existential, philosophical conversations these days. And I think that's uncomfortable in a world of hypergrowth.
Yeah, I mean, that seems heavy. That seems weighty for sure. So you mentioned you were talking about patient experience a lot and, you know, the infrastructure that exists for patient experience in healthcare and how you've said that it's a little bit undercooked, underbaked. In an ideal world, like what does getting it right look like? And what do you think, again, this is like weight of the world question, but what has to change for health systems to achieve that?
How much time do we have?
Let me lay out the entire life's work of all of these people. Yeah.
Does your dog need to go for a walk and then we'll come back?
Yeah, exactly.
So let me answer what getting it right looks like. And that's not necessarily because I think it's easier, but I think there's actually tangible advice out there on this one. And I will be honest, like this is part of the huge story that's going to see the light of day in a few weeks. But like, I think what getting it right looks like is like automation, but like choiceful, purposeful, durable automation. It looks like composable stacks, right? It looks like not being chained to a single platform that is inflexible or built on legacy pipes. It looks like network access. And I think all of that is kind of on the back end of client sides. To the consumer, I think what it looks like is like ideally proprietary, memorable, like as much as possible, individually personalized experiences. Because like we remember how we feel. We remember what we lived through. We don't remember like, oh, I transacted and I bought this can of seltzer. Like we remember how we feel. I think it also looks like owned ecosystems where a brand is never blocked by a lack of access, a lack of ownership, a lack of authority to do what they need to do for their business. It looks like data. It looks like data in ways that I have opted into and that you as a brand have a right to use. And then I think actually like it looks like it feels emotional. So like whatever you're doing, I think a good rule of thumb these days more than ever is like, should I, brand X, be doing this? Is this both right for the people I'm serving and right for my business? And am I the best, first, best, only, most correct, fast follow, optimized company that should be doing this? And I that's a complicated ecosystem of what good looks like, but I think I continue to believe that what endures through all of this as media is continually commoditized, as there's too much content for really anyone anywhere in the world. Like I continue to believe that experience, branded, data-informed experience is what will endure and frankly, what will differentiate. Because I think as even Fortune 500 businesses transform, the experience can remain similar, right? And it can still feel like that brand, even if the business model has changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a touch vague and a touch metaphysical, but like I think that is kind of where I land these days.
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well. But yes, quite metaphysical.
Yes.
Okay, I have a couple questions left for you. First being so we started this conversation talking about your like non-traditional background, coming from something outside of healthcare. What are the lessons you think that that healthcare clients can learn from non-healthcare clients?
Yeah, I like this question, and I think it can veer on a bit in like a bit of a trite direction, but I think not starting with the limitations and not starting with the restrictions is one. I think 15 years ago, everybody wanted to be Uber for something, right? And what that meant was, how can we remove the friction from what we do? I think today, healthcare brands need to look at the best, most enduring experiences from businesses that have survived the last, 25 years and figure out what that means for them. I also think healthcare brands can learn from non-healthcare brands, like perhaps to be less precious about what they're doing. I think there's rightly a lot of risk aversion, but we also know that nothing endures at this point. Like, I think we can take a little more risks on an Instagram story. I think we can take a couple of risks if you're putting your providers on TikTok. Like, I don't want to see my provider doing the latest like Miguel TikTok dance. I would appreciate a touch of personality and a touch of levity, right? Because like providers are the assets in the healthcare systems, right? And they have their own burdens. Like, let them live a little on social,
Yes.
So I think like a touch of levity is something we can all learn from the people who are creating things that we remember.
Yeah. If this episode could have a tagline, it would be "Let providers live a little."
In
this heavy world. Yeah, let them TikTok a little bit. Cool. Well, my last question is a little bit of a sharp left turn, but the Agency 100 issue this year is themed around video games. So I'm curious if you have a favorite video game or what game do you think best describes your agency?
Oh, man. I am simply not a gamer. I will say a small anecdote. a friend of mine had a milestone birthday. I will protect his privacy, but he had a milestone birthday. And his partner planned an old school, she bought out an arcade, actually, in Jersey City. And I rediscovered my roots as a true street fighter. And I beat all of my male friends as Chun-Li. Oh my God. So, which I learned was actually all of my male friends told me they couldn't believe this because I had never really played. And also apparently she loses a lot. So since that is my one and only reference, but it still feels apropos, I think Huge is Chun-Li. People are underestimating us. It sounds crazy because we have this brand that I do think, and I chose to come to this brand less than a year ago. Like, I do think the brand is quite recognizable. It's hallowed. People know that we did like IKEA's first commerce website. They know we did JetBlue's booking engine, but they're also like, what has Huge done the last few years? Mm-hmm. I think we're Chun-Li. Like, I think it is time for us to come back. And I think it's time for us to like lead the reinvention of what it means to be a service provider in a world where you have to have pivoted to being AI native in order to have any credibility. So I'm going to go with Chun-Li.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I love that you beat all your male friends. That's such a cool party trick that you probably, it seems you didn't even know you had. So kudos there.
Pressing the button,
yeah,
actually.
Yeah, the trick is just like smash the button and hope for the best. Yeah.
There's like something about resilience in there somewhere. You know?
And maybe some carpal tunnel if you do it too much. But yeah, resilience.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Lauren, thank you so much for joining. This has been a really awesome conversation. Appreciate you taking the time and sharing a little bit more about Huge.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.